Next up, please welcome Emily Grossman, also from Mobile Moxie.
All right. I'm Emily Grossman, and I also work with Mobile Moxie as a mobile marketing specialist. And today I'm going to talk to you about how Apple is changing up search. Let's get started. So most people are here today to talk to you about Google. Or maybe Yahoo and Bing. Makes sense. It's a search marketing conference. But I'm going to talk to you today about Apple. Why Apple? Well, Apple has seen quarterly growth, quarter after quarter, and it just keeps getting better for Apple hardware, particularly for the iPhone. Even into Q1 2015, we're seeing huge growth for Apple. But I'm going to posit to you today that Apple's primary market is not actually hardware. And Tim Cook's going to back me up here. He's going to say that Apple is not a hardware company. There are things that we can do at Apple to have revenue and profit flow. So if Apple is not a hardware company, what is it that Apple is considering its primary market? I'm going to steal from Zoolander here and say that they're products in the devices. What kind of products might those be? Well, the primary markets I'm thinking of are iTunes and the App Store. These are markets that Apple owns conceptually and takes a cut from financially. But those are markets that could be threatened by other external markets, particularly markets owned by Google. And as Cindy mentioned in her speech, Google is now starting to put Google Play results even within search. So some of these great products that Apple owns are being threatened more and more by Google entities. So what's Google to do, or what's Apple to do? Enter Spotlight and Safari. So Spotlight, if you're not familiar with Spotlight, searches the content on your device. It comes stock with iOS 8 devices and Yosemite, and it can grab web content as well as that on-device content. Safari is a little different. It's a browser, but it can also search some web content, as we'll see in a little bit. They also have a great sidekick in Siri, and Siri can do on-device and web search, sort of similar to Spotlight. And I think Greg's going to talk a little bit more about voice search in the next session. So we won't talk too much about this, but there's definitely some interesting stuff going on with Siri, specifically in the voice search realm. Now, you're probably wondering, Siri, Safari, Spotlight, these are kind of niche entities, right? What is this going to help me do as a marketer? And I think that the best way to put it is in the words of Marissa Mayer, who said that Safari is actually one of the most premier search deals in the world from Yahoo's perspective right now. And that's partially because Mac users are growing, and they're incredibly loyal to their devices. So this is a Microsoft Windows 10 event. Actually, looking around right now, I see a very similar picture. And you can see that Mac users want to use their Mac devices all the time. It doesn't matter where they are, what they're doing, who their business is. They want to use their Mac devices. And they're also really unlikely to change the default settings on their devices, particularly when we look at mobile. So the mobile browser share is really heavily weighted towards Safari. And that kind of makes sense. If you think about your friends that are iPhone users, or maybe you're an iPhone user, it's kind of a easy way to go. Just use the default browser instead of going and downloading a Chrome app. So with that in mind, I think I want to summarize for you what we're going to see in the next couple of minutes, which is that Apple really wants to increase its stronghold on its primary markets while simultaneously decreasing Google's stronghold on search. And it's going to use some of these tools, Safari, Siri, Spotlight, to do that. It wants to cut in line, cut out Google, and in many cases, actually even cut out web results. More specifically, Apple is predicting search queries and placing Apple's own suggestions ahead of the actual executed search. It's defaulting to Bing search over Google search for Spotlight and Siri. And It's suggesting apps, maps locations, emails, and phone contacts, oftentimes over web content, but sometimes also in addition to. So I want to tell you a little story about my magical unicorn dolphin over here, which is that you may be hearing this talk and thinking to yourself, okay, this is great, Apple is doing all this good stuff for its business, it wants to increase its stronghold on certain properties and weaken Google's stronghold, but what does that have to do with me as a marketer? And so my story for you is that I had a girlfriend tell me one time, she said that she was traveling and she was running really, really late to her flight. She got to the check-in counter, she checked her bag, she's got about 20 minutes left to go, and she just stops in front of the security checkpoint. And it's just covered with people. People are waiting for hours to get through the security checkpoint. And she pauses for a moment. She's got 20 minutes to make her flight. She says, I see the problem here. It actually is only about 20 feet between me and my destination. But there's like all these people zigzagging in between. So what if I just go straight? That would solve the problem. And so what she actually did was she ducked through the ropes and she made it, and she caught her flight on time. And so essentially, looking at the situation right now with what Apple's doing with search, as a smart marketer, you might think to yourself, okay, so Apple's jumping through the line. And the best way, or maybe one of the best ways for you to respond to that would be to say, well, me too. So if you listen to this presentation and look for my little unicorn dolphin icon, I'm going to be giving you guys some cool little hacks in order to take advantage of some of the changes that Apple is bringing to their devices for search. Just make sure that you don't do this instead of all your great Google strategies. Don't abandon them. Don't tweet that I told you that you don't need to worry about Google anymore. This is definitely in addition to, not instead of. So first things first, how is Apple cutting in line? So Apple, as soon as you initiate a search from Safari or Spotlight, Apple is starting to try and get you away from hitting that enter button, away from hitting that go button, away from executing a Google search. So one of the things that they're doing is they're trying to provide you with results up front that look pretty attractive. So suggested websites, got a nice little header, got some dressed up images, really, really beautiful results up top, Google search below. We also see the same thing with some Wikipedia entries and news results. Again, Apple suggested results on top, Google search maybe below. Now, if you notice in that last slide, the Spotlight search actually doesn't have any Google suggestions at all. And that's because Spotlight and Siri use Bing instead. They don't use Google. And Safari is still defaulting to Google. But if you notice, if you go into any iOS device, you can easily, just by switching a check mark, change your default search engine. And if you haven't read up on DuckDuckGo optimization, there's a great search engine land post on that, but that's even an option. Pretty much anything that Apple can do to get you away from that Google search. And a sort of fun fact about this, right now, this contract, the Google Safari contract, is up for renewal. And so a lot of talk has been going on about whether or not it will be or won't be renewed. And Yahoo has explicitly expressed interest at this point about going forward and placing a bid on that contract with Safari. So in the rare cases that Apple has acknowledged that maybe the Bing results or their suggested results didn't quite satisfy your needs, they'll offer you some other sources. But they're not going to be Google sources. Twitter, Wikipedia, anything to get you to search a different avenue than to exit and search Google. Now, this is potentially the most interesting part, I think, for search marketers, which is how non-web content is performing in Apple's new search world. So this is a slide from Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference in San Francisco, when they started talking about all the new cool things that Spotlight was going to do. And you can see just a ton of entities that Apple wants to show you with Spotlight search. We don't have time to go through all of these today, but we're going to try and get through a lot of the most important ones for you. So an interesting result here, suggested specific location result, maybe not that surprising, but we get this beautiful maps result for a hotel that was near my house in Denver, and it takes me to Apple Maps, not Google Maps, anything to get away from Google's properties. And Safari is even suggesting location groupings. So if I search for a hotel near my house, I might get a hotel grouping, and that will take me to an Apple Maps locations page, and it'll send me to maybe a list of search results where I can read reviews by Yelp, and again, nowhere is Google. And what this means for you is that if you want to get that pretty little icon next to your business or be part of a great listing, you might want to get on Apple Maps. And the best place to start with this is to make sure that your business is listed on these 5 major entities and that your information is basically the same across the board there. Spotlight also does something interesting in that since it's searching on-device content, it searches your contacts too. That makes sense. That's not that interesting. What is interesting is that it's searching all of the info in the vCard. So that means that I could have a contact with a great notes section, and Spotlight will pull up results based on keywords in that notes section. So this auto assist company, I use them all the time in Denver. My car stalls constantly, and they will jump my car for $40. So I put this in my phone, and auto assist comes up as the top hit for car. It's pretty neat. So you're a smart marketer, and you've decided, I know what I'll do. I'll get users to download my keyword-rich vCard, and then I can cut the line on their phones. And you really could, especially for some really difficult queries, get ahead of Bing search, mail results, occasionally websites. Suggested emails and messages on Spotlight is also potentially interesting to us as search marketers. If you've ever wanted to have a hold on email optimization, this is a great way to go. Right now, it's a very simple system, and the best way to optimize your emails for Spotlight search is to put the most important keywords early in the subject line and to hopefully send recent emails so that they can be logged. Mobile devices are not as good at that. They just don't have as much storage space or as much memory, so those will have a harder time ranking if they're older. True to the goals of Apple and its primary markets, iTunes content is really important. And so it ranks really, really well in both Safari and Spotlight search. We get rich previews with iTunes movies and songs. It's showing beautiful images, ratings. Also, even for songs, it's telling you like what track it is in an album or what year the song was developed. But probably more interesting to me are suggested apps. And the best thing to note here is that Spotlight is preferring installed apps to uninstalled apps or websites. So this query on the left shows a query for flight when Kayak is not installed, and I get a suggested website. The same query on the right, when Kayak is installed, it gets replaced by the Kayak app. So you might also be wondering, why is Kayak ranking for flight at all? I mean, there's no word there that says flight. It doesn't seem to have anything around it that says flight. What's going on? So Spotlight is actually looking at the app bundle name or the app title in the iTunes store, which is different and distinct from the app bundle display name, which is what you see underneath the icon on your phone, Amazon, Sudoku, Kayak. So when we talk about App Store optimization, we often tell people it's a great idea to make sure that your app titles are keyword rich for App Store search optimization. But it's also really important in Spotlight. So making sure that you are putting your most important keywords in that app title is one of the best ways to ensure that you'll come up on a user's phone for your most important keywords. Now, the cool thing about this is that even if your competitor is in the same room and they hear the same talk and they're like, great, I'm going to do it too, I'm so excited, I'm going to get installed on a user's device, and then I'll always rank for the word flight. It's okay. Both of you would actually displace the website. Again, Apple is looking to send users to your app content before they're sending you to the search engine or potentially another website. So Safari doesn't actually crawl the installed apps yet. Remember, this is just web search for Safari. But you can see that Apple is still really interested in sending it to the App Store. So even on Safari, it makes a lot of sense to have a keyword-targeted app in the store so that you can rank above those Google search suggestions, above even bookmarks and history for that particular user. Having a keyword-optimized app in the App Store is a huge opportunity for Apple search. And this is sort of a beautiful, ideal scenario if you're a brand to see something like this. But of course, you would also want to get this for your targeted keywords to have the stacked results with both your website and your app. So in the last few minutes here, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the problems that we're seeing with Apple's search world. It's pretty young. They're figuring things out still. They're still testing issues. And so we're seeing a lot of early Google-esque issues with Apple's search. I'm calling this the frontier problem, but it's basically an exact match domains issue. And that's the suggested website we get. The Bing search suggestion at the bottom is not much better. It just really doesn't understand the user intent there. But the app does. And so that's a great strategy if you're having issues with exact match domains on Spotlight, or Maps listings if you're a local business. We're also seeing this issue on Safari, and it's even more obvious when we see the Google search results that are much better at understanding that searcher intent. We also see some issues in emails. My mom had no idea that she was optimizing her email for Spotlight when she emailed me in 2011 about Frontier's baggage charges. But what she did unknowingly was put the word Frontier very early in her subject line. So that's what Spotlight thinks I want to read about, as opposed to my check-in for my Frontier flight later that week. What this tells us, too, is that even if you email someone from a Frontier Airlines domain, it doesn't necessarily matter to Spotlight as much as that beautiful subject line. Quick note on this, too, though. If you were to do the same search on a mobile device, my mom's email wouldn't appear. 2011 is too old. And finally, I want to talk about spelling mistakes. So Apple's actually improved this substantially, but it's really slow at figuring out that you've spelled a word wrong. So eventually, this result will populate certain things from Wikipedia and Bing, as Bing and Wikipedia figure out that I've spelt Israel wrong. It's not going to correct the spelling for some of my on-device search, certainly not as quickly. In the same time that I was looking at the image on the left, Google already told me that I had spelled it wrong, and it was going to show me the better results, or it was going to suggest better spelled results for me. So all of this is to say that Apple knows that they're not that great at this search thing yet, but they're trying, and they have a vested interest in improving it. So as marketers, we should really be aware of what's going on here and be constantly looking for ways to sort of ride that bypass and get our products up front. So if you want to talk more about some of the interesting things that are going on with Apple search, go ahead and tweet us at Mobile Moxie, or if you want to talk to me about French food, I tweet at Goo Taste. And then we're also on Facebook, or you can find us online. Thanks.